It's pretty well known by this point that Star Wars The Last Jedi has provoked some passionate responses. The film's critical reception was, by and large, quite positive, and a great deal of fans seem to have enjoyed it as well. But the ones who hated the second film in Disney's Star Wars sequel trilogy really hated it. And they let you know. One of the more frequent criticisms I see lobbed at The Last Jedi, outside the insane cut all the women out of the movie fringe, concerns Finn's sub-story in the film. Even some who like the movie overall seem less than thrilled about Finn and Rose's excursion to the Canto Bight Casino, or even Rose's character as a whole. On the surface, it's easy to see where they're coming from. Rey spends The Last Jedi training with Luke Skywalker in the ways of the Force and gaining a deeper understanding of Kylo Ren, and Poe Dameron spends it struggling with his place in the Resistance and fighting to save the fleet from impending destruction at the hands of evil. You know, classic Star Wars. Finn, on the other hand, ventures off with Rose to a casino to find a master codebreaker, where they get arrested for a parking ticket, meet another guy who can do the exact thing they need, set some animals free, break onto the First Order ship, fail at the job they were supposed to do there, escape on a shuttle, and go join the rest of the rebels on Crate for the final showdown. Compared on its face to the other plotlines in the film, Finn's quest in The Last Jedi seems kind of odd and inconsequential. But if you dig deeper into the Ballad of Finn and Rose, there's purpose to be found. The Canto Bight adventure tests Finn in new and interesting ways, giving him the opportunity to decide what's truly important to him and what sort of man he wants to be. It also uses the character of Rose to show the audience why the survival of the Resistance is so important. First, before we get into fathier races and red plum blooms, we need a bit of context. Let's start with the basics. Who is Finn? Until very recently, Finn was a stormtrooper. It's difficult to pin down exactly how much time passes between the end of The Force Awakens and the opening of The Last Jedi, but by the time Finn wakes up in the Bacta suit, it's been, let's say at the most, 2 weeks since he deserted the First Order. And he's been unconscious for a good chunk of that time, so it's only reasonable to believe that his life as a stormtrooper is very fresh in his mind. It's also the only life he's ever known, having been kidnapped as a child and conditioned to serve the First Order.
FN-2187 reported to my division, was evaluated and sent to reconditioning.
No prior signs of nonconformity.
This was his first offense.
Why then did Finn desert? Well, he saw his stormtrooper unit slaughter a village of innocent witnesses and decided he didn't want to part in their reign of terror any longer. A crucial point to remember, though, is that Finn is not, at the start of The Last Jedi, a member of the Resistance. He more or less got roped into the quest to return BB-8 to the Resistance leadership, and then once Rey got captured he agreed to help rescue her from Starkiller Base. But keep in mind that his ultimate goal has always been to get away from the First Order, not to help destroy them. Maz Kanata sums it up perfectly.
If you live long enough, you see the same eyes in different people. I'm looking at the eyes of a man who wants to run.
You don't know a thing about me. Where I'm from, what I've seen. You don't know the First Order like I do. They'll slaughter us. We all need to run.
Finn is convinced that fighting against the First Order is more or less a suicide mission, and this belief is far from unreasonable. Their stranglehold on the galaxy is only growing tighter, and he's witnessed firsthand the fanatical, cult-like devotion they encourage among their soldiers. Though the Resistance managed to destroy Starkiller Base, Han Solo died in the process, and Finn nearly lost his own life trying to fight off Kylo Ren. At the opening of The Last Jedi, Finn is still very much the man who wants to run. He likes the Resistance, likes the fact that Poe and Leia regard him as something special, but he still can't imagine a future where the rebellion doesn't end up crushed under the heel of the First Order's boot. He's sympathetic to them, but wary of making a commitment he might not survive. So, in order to save his own life and lead Rey out of the First Order's path, he decides to jump ship. And then he runs into Rose. Rose Tico is every inch the true believer that Finn is not. She and her sister Paige, after experiencing the tyranny of the First Order on their home planet, joined up with the Resistance in order to make the galaxy a more just place. After Paige's death in the attack on the Dreadnought, Rose feels especially insulted by Finn's desire to run away from the cause she's sacrificed so much for. Even in the face of suffering on a massive scale, Rose's worldview is an essentially idealistic one. She believes that positive change can be achieved, and that it's worth fighting for. Finn, on the other hand, is skeptical that the First Order can be beaten at all. With this ideological divide in mind, let's jump ahead to Canto Bight. Canto Bight, the lavish playground for the galactic 1%, brings out new dimensions in both our heroes, effectively flipping the dynamic that's been established thus far. Finn, up to this point a wary skeptic, is stunned by the wealth and luxury all around him. It's likely that, in the course of his duties as a stormtrooper, he's never experienced a place like this, where pleasure reigns supreme and fear and desperation are nowhere to be found. The only evil he's equipped to recognize is the overt Nazi-esque fanaticism of the First Order. Rose, the spirited idealist of the two, sees through the slick veneer right away. She knows that greed and the exploitation of labor can destroy lives as easily as a blaster can.
My sister and I grew up in a poor mining system. The First Order stripped our ore to finance their military, then shelled us to test their weapons.
By explaining why she hates the gaudy excess of Canto Bight so much, Rose encourages Finn to be more actively critical of his surroundings. His outlook, shaped by the stark moral worldview of the First Order, has finally begun to expand. Speaking of differing viewpoints, now's as good a time as any to tackle DJ. Just as Rose represents one of Finn's potential paths, the path of dedication to the Resistance, DJ shows Finn that extreme self-interest is another viable option. Unlike Finn, whose lack of ideological character is due to his intense fear of the First Order, DJ is a hardcore cynic who believes that struggling for someone else's benefit is pointless. He's convinced that picking a side at all, no matter which side it is, means giving up an essential freedom.
Finn, let me learn you something big. It's all a machine, partner. Live free, don't join.
To a committed rebel like Rose, this idea would likely come across as selfish, amoral nonsense. But to Finn, who spent most of his life in the clutches of a machine, escaping mere weeks ago, this kind of libertarian worldview can't help but be a little appealing. If joining up with the Resistance is really as foolish as Finn suspects it might be, why join up at all? Is there really a difference between dying for one cause over another? Either way, you're dead. What sets Finn apart from DJ, however, is that Finn knows the value of loyalty and friendship. Ultimately, his fear of the First Order is outweighed by his devotion to his friends. He's willing to fight his way back into Starkiller Base, the very heart of the machine he just escaped, if it means rescuing Rey from a tight spot. He might be reluctant to take up the mantle of heroism at times, but he comes through when it matters most. Deep down, he's more selfless than selfish, and Rose comes to realize this over the course of their adventure. She also shows him, through their efforts to defy the ultra-wealthy denizens of Canto Bight and free the Fathiers, that the established order of things is not inevitable. The world can be changed, and even in a world saturated with decadence and greed, there are people who are eager for something better. DJ's betrayal aboard the First Order command ship is just the last nail in the coffin for any appeal that a self-centered worldview might have held for Finn. For someone like Finn, who knows all too well the vast and merciless cruelty of the First Order, cutting a deal with them that puts the Resistance in peril isn't just selfish, it's profoundly evil. In DJ, Finn sees a clear example of the kind of person his desire to run from trouble might cause him to become. At the same time, he's grown more confident that the fight isn't hopeless. The Resistance blew up Starkiller Base, and he and Rose turned a stronghold of wealth and power upside down, even if just for a single night. On top of that, Finn finds the courage and strength to defeat one of the First Order's fiercest warriors. He's learned that the bleakest situations can be turned around, and that even when things seem hopeless, there's no better place to be than beside his friends. So, at this point in the film, when Finn has killed Phasma and escaped the command ship with Rose and BB-8, he's a changed person. No longer the man who wants to run, he's ready to commit himself to the cause of the Resistance and fight for the greater good, even if that means giving his own life in the process. He's grown a great deal, but his journey in this film isn't over. Though he's free of the fears that weighed him down, Finn is still burdened by the First Order's training and conditioning. he still thinks like a stormtrooper. Keep in mind what he says after the rampage through Canto Bight.
It was worth it, though. To tear up that town, make him hurt.
A stormtrooper's goal is not to preserve anything except the might of an empire. And how is such an empire built up? By crushing any and all opposition, squeezing every drop of hope out of the galaxy by any means necessary. That's not the way of the Resistance. The Rebels' goal is ultimately constructive, but Finn's life in the First Order has trained him to think in terms of destruction. Case in point, the victory Finn takes away from Canto Bight is that he and Rose were able to tear a gash through a town built on ill-gotten wealth. Rose, on the other hand, is happiest that they freed the Fathiers.
Now it's worth it.
This dynamic is echoed in the assault on the cannon in the film's finale. When Poe orders a retreat, Finn is still in the mindset of a stormtrooper. He's trying to defend his friends, yes, but he's so determined to destroy the evil in the galaxy that he loses sight of everything else, charging ahead on a suicide mission that might not even work. And when Rose saves his life, knocking him out of the beam's path, she also forces him to break away from his self-destructive mentality. She reminds him why the Resistance's fight is so important. Its goal is not just to eradicate the bad, but to create something better.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
The theme of protecting the light runs throughout The Last Jedi. Poe's character arc centers around his struggle to be the best leader he can, clashing with Leia and Holdo over how the Resistance can survive and keep the fires of rebellion burning. Rey is more or less handed the fate of the Jedi Order, and she has to keep its teachings safe both from Luke, who believes the Jedi have outlived their usefulness, and Snoke, who wants to wipe the Jedi out so that the dark side can reign. The idea that fostering goodness is more important than simply destroying evil is not only central to this story, it's classic Star Wars. After all, Luke could have simply killed Darth Vader in their final battle. Doing so might have been easier than the alternative. But he knew finding the humanity in his father was more important than wiping him out. It's a bit difficult at this point to assess Finn's character arc as a whole because, well, it's not over yet. We're only 2/3 of the way through his story, and I'm sure only a handful of people know at this point how it's going to end. Still, I imagine big things are in store for him. In The Force Awakens, Finn took his first steps toward the light, casting off his stormtrooper armor and fighting to save his friend from the clutches of evil. In The Last Jedi, he committed himself to the cause of the Resistance, overcoming his fears and breaking free of the First Order's lingering influence. Moving forward into Episode 9, Finn's proven that he has great strength of character and moral resolve. With qualities like those, he just might be a true rebel hero in the making.
You are always scum.
Rebel scum.